Hi, y'all. I'm going to talk today, or tonight, about foreign policy or foreign events that were going on after World War I, leading up to the events that began World War II. I'll probably do two different videos, one for tonight, one for tomorrow night, and then we'll talk about significant events of the war, at least from the U.S. perspective in class. Remember, of course, that in the end of World War I, the Treaty of Versailles ended the war, and that the big piece that Wilson really proposed and wanted was the League of Nations, and that was all created, but because the Senate here in the U.S. would not approve membership for the United States in the League of Nations, the United States was never a member. Because of the financial situation, specifically in Germany at the end of World War I, and the fact they were saddled with the war reparations payments, trying to struggle and rebuild their own economy, we end up seeing the rise of the Nazi Party under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, of course, the rise of Benito Mussolini in Italy in the 20s into the 30s, the rise of a militaristic totalitarian state in Japan, all while the U.S. follows a policy that really describes this period, and that's isolationism. We had tried to stay out of World War I. We had got dragged into World War I. Lots of devastation, loss of life, enormously expensive. And so the goal for most Americans was to come home and get on with their lives, and we don't want to worry about what's going on in the rest of the world anymore. We liked remaining isolated. So throughout the 20s and 30s, events that are going on in the rest of the world that we probably, I won't say prevented, but maybe we could have intervened at some point and reduced the amount of devastation that ends up happening. Had we done that, we choose to remain isolated and not to do anything. Now, on the other side of that coin, we are in the midst of the Great Depression. There is a lot to deal with at home as well. So just all of these circumstances together sort of create the perfect environment for things to begin to spin out of control again in Europe. I'm going to upload a chart into Blackboard for you called Events Leading to World War II. So you could kind of look at that while I'm talking. If you want to, it might kind of explain my process. I'm not going to go over all of this. You can read this. But what we begin to see mid-1930s is attempts by the Germans and the Italians to begin taking over various parts of Africa. And then Hitler in particular is going to go into parts of Europe that had German-speaking people that were separated when they created the new countries after World War I. And so in 1935, we see Italy invade Ethiopia. The League of Nations condemns such an action, but no one really wants to take the risk to do anything about it. At this point, when the League kind of doesn't respond, it's kind of like a go-ahead for these guys to continue taking territory as they want to. The German invasion of the Rhineland. This is part of Germany that the Germans lost in the Treaty of Versailles, that border between France and Germany. Hitler invades, takes over that territory. France does not respond. The Spanish also have their own civil war. Francisco Franco comes to power. He was also a dictator, and their democracy is abolished. Hitler had already demolished the republic in Germany. And so Hitler and Mussolini get together and say, we'll be allies, we'll defend one another in the Rome-Berlin axis. Hitler then invades Austria. Austria was his homeland. He was born in Austria. He comes in, he takes over, and he's going to be using the new kind of warfare, the Blitzkrieg, which is lightning war. He's going to send airplanes in to bomb, then send in tanks and infantry soldiers after that. And so the devastation created by the bombing was generally so bad that by the time troops were actually sent in, they were ready to surrender. So Austria then falls to Hitler. In September of 1938, we have the Munich Conference. Now, this was a meeting between Great Britain, France, and Hitler. And at the meeting, they condemn his invasion of Austria and the Rhineland. But, at this point, there's not much they can do about it. He's already taken it. So he explains that he really just wants to unite all of the German-speaking people. And the last piece of this is part of Czechoslovakia called the Sudetenland. And I have some maps of this, too, that we can look at. So the agreement was that if Hitler was allowed to take over the Sudetenland, that would be enough. He would have reunited the German-speaking people, and he would stop his invasion of other countries. This policy is called appeasement, the idea that if we give in a little and make this person happy, then we can avoid further conflict. So Britain and France agreed. Hitler took the Sudetenland, and then the next month he took the rest of Czechoslovakia after, he said he wouldn't. Czechoslovakia had a treaty with France that they would be allies and that France would come to their aid in the event something happened, such as this. But France would not go to war alone. They would not go without Great Britain. And so as a result, Hitler once again is able to take over another country with no response. Finally, Stalin is watching this from the Soviet Union. And remember that Russia had to withdraw from World War I in 1917 because of the Bolshevik Revolution that was going on within their own country. There's going to be a couple of revolutions in Russia until the Communist Party does take complete control. And then after World War I, the United States has its first Red Scare. Communism, a very different form of government than the United States. And so there was a natural mistrust. However, Stalin, having lived through the First World War and the first invasion by Germany, is looking at Hitler and becomes very concerned that, like World War I, he's next. He's next to be invaded. And so he meets with Hitler, and they sign a non-aggression pact that they will not attack one another. And Stalin, after that, is pretty okay with Hitler doing whatever as long as he doesn't bother him or the Soviet Union. Then in September of 1939, Germany invades Poland. And at this point, Great Britain and France both realize that he's not going to stop until he's conquered all of Europe. And this is really the beginning of World War II, is 1939 with the invasion of Poland. Prior to this invasion, Hitler's policies of Aryan superiority and discrimination against the Jews, moving them into Jewish ghettos, severe discrimination in terms of education, politically, economically, closing their businesses down, things like this, had been occurring. Poland then had a large Jewish population, and at this point, this is when Great Britain and France declare war against Hitler. The Soviet Union does go into what is now Finland. This was part of the Non-Aggression Pact, that if certain part of the Baltic region was left for Stalin, then Hitler could take whatever else he wanted. The United States is watching all of this, definitely paying attention, but still determining to remain neutral. And so in 1939, we have the Neutrality Act. We'll sell war materials, but they're going to have to come get them from us. We are not going to risk that submarine warfare like we suffered in World War I. Hitler, once he's gone into Poland, then turns on France. And so he goes through Belgium, the Netherlands, which were neutral countries. He invaded them anyway, to get into France. And pretty quickly, France is going to fall to the German invasion. The Brits had been in France to help fight off this invasion as well. They are going to finally leave in the evacuation of Dunkirk and go back to England, because it's pretty obvious that once he's gotten France, Hitler is going to set his eyes on Great Britain. Finally, in June of 1940, France surrenders. Germans take control of the northern part of France. There's still a French government officially in Vichy, in the southern part of France, but it was controlled by the Nazis. So, in effect, France is now under German occupation. Great Britain knows that Hitler is coming for them next. So tomorrow night, I'll pick up with the Battle of Britain on through the attack at Pearl Harbor. Have a good evening. Bye.